Okay, everybody, so I wanted to make a video on how I studied for dedicated because there's a lot of information and a lot of ideas, and I wanted to write it all out for you guys, which I'm going to make available down below in the comments. But I also wanted to give you somewhere where you could kind of have your questions answered and hear what my opinions on some of the resources. So those of you who don't know me, I'm Grace. I am a third-year medical student from St. George University. I was a nurse before this, and I make schedules for students at St. George and elsewhere to kind of study throughout their second year of med school, and then through following that, wanting to transition into making schedules for dedicated. So I would say that most of my success in dedicated and most of your success in dedicated is going to be based on how much you have studied in the past, obviously. So you can study and follow the schedule perfectly to a T, and if you're not prepared adequately, it's not going to help you. Or vice versa, if you don't follow this schedule or use another one, but you've been studying dedicated material, you've been studying first aid and pathoma and UWorld and everything for ages now, you're going to do well regardless. So take that into consideration with everything that I'm telling you. This is based on just my personal experience and how I studied for dedicated to do well. So the first thing I wanted to show you guys, here we go, is just the day-by-day schedule I made here. So as you can see, I have 7-day study week. However, I only have 5 days of full studying. So you see that 1 day a week, ideally, I just have it set up here in the middle of the week, but you want to make it whatever day you signed up for STEP. So if you have STEP on a Wednesday morning at 8 a.m., your practiced NBME should be Wednesday mornings at 8 a.m. You want to get your body and brain as similar to test day as possible, right? So test day would be NBMEs throughout the entire of dedicated. I made a 7-week schedule because that's what I used. Obviously use more time if you need it and less time if you need it. So the day after NBMEs were pretty exhausting, so I made them half days. So instead of doing, 80 to 100 questions those days, you're just going to review some material and then go get out of your house and do something fun. So that really leaves you with 5 days a week of proper material UWorld studying, which is not a lot for 7 weeks. That definitely narrows down the amount of days that you actually have to study. That's 35 days of you doing questions. So I have here what pages you should review from first aid, which sketches you should review, what picturizes you should review. For all 7 weeks, you're going to be able to download this, save it, follow it, or not follow it. This is just so you can get and see everything one more time before you take the exam. This is not if you've never seen the sketchies before, this is not for you. This is if you've already seen the sketchies 5 or 6 times, you just want to see it one more time before exam day. So split it up over 7 weeks. You need to do 6 pages of path in first aid, 4 in physio, 3 in biochem, and 5 in general principles. You need to do 3 sketchy farms and 3 sketchy micros and 4 picturizes every day, which is a lot. These are things you're going to get to secondarily. Your first thing listed and your most important thing is your UWorld. So every day you're going to do at least 2 blocks. I have the first week all split up for 2 blocks because it just kind of takes some getting into. Once we get to the second week, you'll see that a lot of the days have 2.5 blocks. You're going to need to do this in order to finish all of UWorld in time. Both the days right before NBMEs, I say to break it down to 2 because you're going to be doing a lot of questions the next day. And the following day, you don't do any questions. So the rest of the week, at least 4 days a week, you're going to be doing 2.5 blocks, blocks of 40. And that is a lot of questions. But in order to finish in time, that is what you have to do if you're doing a 7-week schedule. All right. So I have a couple links here. Best YouTube advice that I found for dedicated. This is kind of what I based my dedicated schedule on originally when I did it. in this past July 2019 is when I took STEP. Jason Ryan's advice from Boards and Beyond for STEP is absolutely beautiful. He talks a lot about how it's impossible to know everything and how good test taking really plays a giant role in taking STEP, and he is, I mean, the person to know about that. So I would read every word he has to say. It's really good advice. It really is a de-stressor a little bit because, like I said, it's impossible to know everything. You don't need to know everything to score really well. I have my video here on how to use filter decks, which I think is imperative for STEP. If you're an Anki person, or if you're not an Anki person, I would still highly recommend watching that video and using that during dedicated. And then here I have the USMLE Step 1 breakdown, and this has the percentages for each topic on STEP. It is always subject to change. They do update it, but in general, what percentages are each. So I just have this little disclaimer here that this is a 7-week schedule. This is for people who have finished Boards and Beyond and people who have not finished UWorld. Okay, so there's over 2,700 questions. I think they're almost up to 28 at this point. And you do not have time to watch all of Boards and Beyond. So if you haven't yet, I mean, you're either going to have to skip it or you need to do that before you start dedicated. So that is just my mention there. Okay, so UFAAPPS is the gold standard for dedicated, for STEP studying, for what you need to know to do well. So hopefully these resources are all things that you have been using throughout your second year and first year of medical school. But if not, it's going to be a full crash course. So these are in order of importance. UWorld, number 1, nothing else is important. If you only could study one thing during dedicated, it would be UWorld. People will tell you this over and over again. It's 1,000% true. Okay, so UWorld is a little stressful, especially if you're doing it properly. UWorld should be done closed book, timed, in a stressful environment to get used to the environment. But you don't want to, be upset if you're getting 40s or 50s or 60s on every block. That's fine. What you want to do is you want to learn as much as possible. You don't only want to learn the content, but you want to learn question styles and why you're getting things wrong. So that is number 1 in the day. If you do not finish your UWorld, you do not start anything else. Okay. Second is first aid. First aid is not a textbook. It does not teach you anything. It is to review. So I like spending a good 2 hours every day on first aid just to review concepts that I'm not going to see necessarily at any other point and to remind myself of things I've forgotten. So again, it's not going to teach you. If you're bad at anatomy, just reading first aid anatomy is not going to change that. It's just to constantly refresh. Oh, I haven't looked at GI in a month. Let me just remind myself the differences between ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease. Anki is unbelievable, amazing, and hopefully you've been using it, but if you haven't, it's not too late to start Anki. I definitely switched completely over to filter decks during dedicated because of efficiency, and like I said, there's the video you can see for that. Filter decks allow you to be a lot more efficient and only study the things you don't know. You don't want to spend hours and hours going over things that you're good at. You want to spend time with what you're bad at. So every time you get a question wrong on UWorld, you should be finding a card in Anki and putting that into a filter deck. So Pathoma has some mixed comments. I didn't use it much during dedicated, but I think a lot of us had wished we used it a little bit more because STEP ends up being a little simpler and straightforward than we expect it to. And Pathoma is a little simpler and more straightforward. So I did add it into the schedule. I think it's a really good review of things. It's a quick review of things. Going through first aid takes a long time. It's very time intensive. Pathoma is a little bit of a nicer review. So I have you going over a chapter or two after you take the NBME on the next day when it's your half day, just kind of reviewing and just kind of reading through and making it familiar. Picture Eyes. Picture Eyes saved me because I am not fantastic at biochem or the first, couple months of medical school where it's basic sciences, FTM, pathways, and diseases. Picture Eyes is your sketchy for all things not Pharm, Micro, and Path. I highly recommend it. It is amazing. It got me so many points on STEP and UWorld and etc. I just go buy the account. It's worth every dollar. It's not expensive. If there's really no reason you shouldn't be using it, it's very, very helpful. Sketchy, I am a Sketchy fanatic. I use Sketchy Path, I use Sketchy Micro, I use Sketchy IM now that I'm in 3rd year. I love everything about it. It got me so many points on STEP and so many points in Dedicated and New World. I have my highest points all in Micro and Pharm simply because of Sketchy. So please don't knock it. Please don't sleep on it. Go review over and over and over again. So the key with Sketchy is I have 4 videos or 3 videos Pharm, 3 videos of Micro every day. But I don't want you just to watch those 3 videos. I want you to pick those videos based on what questions you get wrong. So if you get a question wrong on aspirin, I want you to go watch that video today, and that counts as one of your 3 videos. And then you can just rearrange the schedule that way. If you get a question wrong on Candida or mycoplasma, go watch that video right after. Get that in your brain, find it, circle it, and highlight it. You don't want to miss a chance to really solidify the things that are in there, and they're usually in there. Alright, so then here comes a little more controversial topic, is NBMEs. NBMEs are written by the same people who write STEP, so they're very important because they show you really the most similar to STEP. Now, when I say similar, I say that the questions are most similar. I don't mean that the scores are most similar. So this summer, NBME retired a lot of old NBMEs and added a bunch of new ones. Because of this, there's a really large disparity in scoring. So you'll end up doing really well on the old NBMEs because UWorld has made questions on them, RX has made questions on them. All of the information for them is in Sketchy and in First Aid, so you've seen the material. So those scores tend to be a little inflated. And then conversely, the new exams, the new ones are, again, still good for learning, but Sketchy and Pathoma and First Aid haven't caught up to them as much in UWorld as well, so your scores tend to be a bit lower. So I put in here as just an example, a month before Dedicated, I took an old NBME and got easily 15 points over my STEP score. And then 2 days before STEP, I took an new NBME and did 20 points less than I did on STEP. So NBMEs are great for practice. They're really, really important because they're the best indicator of what the questions will look like, but they are not really great predictors. That being said, they're really the only predictors you have. So you want to take them, but you want to take them with a grain of salt. They're really the only thing for you to track, but don't freak out if you go down 5 points from the last one, or if you go up 20 points from the last one. You want to see how you're doing and how you're answering the questions. Okay, Goljan. So on Spotify, or also online if you don't have Spotify, there are audio recordings of this. There's a cult following for Goljan. So there are audio recordings of his Path lectures. He's very simple, straight to the point. He explains things very quickly. And he has these audio recordings that are basically podcasts on Spotify. They're great. I didn't dedicate a lot of time to them because they're very simple and it's just kind of a nice review. But what we would do is we would put them on when we were trying to go to bed at night. And one, that man is a lullaby. He will knock you out and help you go to sleep at night. And 2, it would just be, 15 minutes before I go to sleep with him talking about a topic I hadn't been reviewing. So, I haven't done cardio in a few weeks, and he would start talking about Canon A waves and all different things that, I hadn't reviewed or I hadn't looked at that point, or I still remember his descriptions of syphilis and some of his things that they really stick. He tells stories about things and they really, really stick in your head. So it's great to kind of review Path in that way, especially if you're not reviewing Path through Sketchy. Okay, so here's my little note on test taking skills. What I mentioned here is that really everyone learns the same thing in medical school. Everyone could memorize the same things to a degree. What really comes down to how well you're going to do on STEP is test taking. Obviously, you need to know the material, but what you need to start identifying week 1, day 1, is, did I get this question wrong because I didn't know the material, or because I knew the material and I still couldn't answer it? And that's when you figure out, are your problems more with content, or are you more your problems with question taking, your skills? And then you can decide if you need to practice more question taking skills, or if you need to practice more studying. Okay, so every question you get wrong, you should be categorizing. Did I completely forgot everything about SLE and I didn't remember that it had a type 3 and a type 2 hypersensitivity? Or did you know that information and you still got it wrong? And that's what you need to identify. If you're lacking in testing skills, you need to start Googling, reading about that, or get a tutor, get someone who can teach you the testing skills. They're not hard, but they make a huge, massive difference in your scores. I mentioned the half days here. Okay, additional resources for things you're bad at. So what does this mean? So me specifically, I'm bad at anatomy, which means that I need to spend more time on it. So if consistently on UWorld, my lowest score is anatomy, I'm not going to just do UWorld. I'm going to spend an hour a day doing 30 rapid fire RX questions on anatomy. I did all of the RX, all of the past test, all of the AMBAS anatomy a few times, because I knew that that was the thing I was bad at. I was going to absolutely demolish it. So I studied those things over and over and over again. I didn't, do timed, testing environment things. I just made sure that I was constantly reviewing those. So Kaplan, AMBOSS, UWorld, Sketchy Path, Picturize, also Physio. Physio is great if you're bad at anatomy or physio. And this is a brand of videos that are really, really excellent. They really get to the point. If you're not good at something, they have a great job with DNA and RNA, and they do a great job with just all physio, cardio, cell physio. They're fantastic. So these would be for, I'm not going to buy the Kaplan test bank. It's expensive. But if I'm really, really struggling at a topic and I've done all the RX questions and all the past test questions, those are options for you. AMBOSS is pretty good. Obviously, UWorld. Okay, so down to the schedule. So this is what I did every day, and hopefully it will work for you. So 7 a.m. breakfast and Anki. So you want to get your brain moving before you do your questions, which is why I start with Anki, and music and a good cup of coffee, whatever you need in the morning to kind of get you going. But you definitely want to do some sort of learning, whether it's Anki or Sketchy, before you start your blocks. You want to wake up your brain. Guess what time your step is? 8 a.m. Guess what time you need to start block questions every morning? 8 a.m. And you shouldn't be in your pajamas in your bed. You should be in a library, in a Starbucks, in a study hall. You need to be somewhere that mimics test environment. You want to be a little bit stressed out all the time when you do it, because you're going to be stressed out on test day, so you want to see how you do. UWorld must be timed, not tutor mode. You need to practice the timing, please. It's hard on test day and you want to get used to it. Okay. 9 a.m. you want to take a 10-minute break in between every block. On test day, you're going to take 10 minutes, so start taking 10 minutes now. Don't let your brain get fatigued. Then you're going to come back and you're going to do your second UWorld block. I still like doing timed and not tutor mode for my second block. I want to mimic as much of test conditions as possible. But if you really don't learn as well that way and you want to do your second block on tutor mode so that you can kind of get through it in a more convenient manner, you can. I don't prefer that, but I would say you at least have to do one block timed every day. And then if you want to do one on tutor mode at a little more of a slower pace, then that would be your option to do it for the second block. So this example day specifically only has 2 blocks, but if you are going to do the 2.5 blocks, so that would be an extra 20 questions, I would just do that following the second block here. I would just, as soon as I'm done, I would take 5 minutes and then I would just do 20 more questions to round off my 100 questions for the day. And I have that note here. So now we're only at 10 a.m. and we finished all of our questions, which is great because that's the most important thing that you need to do. Now at 10 a.m. we need to start reviewing our question blocks. And I don't review them. I don't do a block and then review and then do a block and then review, because you're going to be doing all of your questions in a row on test day. You want to do that here too. Now you're going to spend the rest of the day basically reviewing those blocks. So depending on in the beginning, it will take longer to review because you're going to be getting more wrong. So if you get a 40%, it's going to take more time to review than if you get an 80%. That just makes sense because you don't have to quite as in-depth review the questions that you're getting correct. You got them right for a reason. Granted, if you guessed on it, you should know that you need to take more time on it. So this is when I put my Anki cards in the filter deck. This is when I make my list of sketchies that I need to watch, whatever ones I'm getting wrong. My list of picturizes. Again, if I'm, oh man, I keep getting these ovarian cancers wrong, go watch the Sketchy Path for it. Don't just keep getting the ovarian cancers wrong. Find a way to memorize it because what you've done before has not been working. Full hour for lunch. Do some Anki during. You want to do your filter decks of all your incorrects. Take a break. And then you're going to come back and do some pages. So I have you doing 8 pages this hour, so 3 biochem and 5 general principles. Ideally, this is done in a group. You're going to be talking them out. You're going to be asking each other questions. You're going to be saying, oh, I saw this question that talked about this, and you're going to be sharing the ideas and sharing the UWorld questions you've gotten, and that conversation builds more memories. If you're doing it by yourself, this is a little bit harder. I would suggest going into a room and talking it out loud by yourself, asking yourself questions, or writing down the UWorld questions that you've gotten. If you've got a UWorld question on SLE, go ahead and write that question into your first aid, and then when you get to that page on SLE, you're going to read it and you're going to remind yourself, oh yeah, that's how UWorld asked me about that question. Okay, then you have your second block. I mentioned that at this point you're getting tired. You've had a long morning already, and the more questions you review, you start to kind of, okay, I get it. So if you sense yourself doing that, get up, take a moment, but every UWorld question is as important as the last one, and you don't want to get too tired. So keep that in mind. You want to keep saying, why did I get this wrong? Was it test taking or knowledge? You want to keep up all those things. I have gym every day. I think this is crazy important. Even if you're not a gym person, like, exercise is amazing for your mental health. It's amazing for your brain, for your memorization. Whether it's just going outside and doing a walk or going to the gym and doing a run, you're not going to have time to do 2 hours of the gym if that's the type of person you are, but 30 minutes you should do of some exercise no matter what. I would rather you do 30 minutes of that and miss out on some sketchy and get some fresh air, get some sympathetic nervous system kicking in, than not. I would really push for that. Then you have dinner and Anki. Again, take almost a full hour. Take that break time for your brain, but keep Anki going. 6 o'clock, Path and Physio pages, so it's 10 pages total, 6 Path, 4 Physio. Try and get through as many of those as you can, but again, your goal is to do UWorld today. So if you don't get through every page you're supposed to, that's okay. Your goal is to finish UWorld. This is secondary or third on your list to do. The most important things start in the beginning of the day. As the day moves on, you're doing things that are less important because 1, you're more tired, and 2, if you take longer on UWorld, you're cutting out these things which are less important. And I have an hour of sketchy and picturize. Again, assuming that you've seen the sketchies before and the picturizes before, you're going to be watching them on double speed and you're going to be doing it as quickly as possible. So 3 sketchy micros should only take you 20 minutes if most of them are 5 minutes and you're watching them on double speed. And then the sketchy farms are a little bit longer, might go over the hour a little bit, but again, double speed, you're just reviewing things you've already seen and you're focusing on the ones you got wrong today. So even if the list says watch Brucella, but you didn't get a question wrong on Brucella, then put that for tomorrow. That's not the most important thing. And if you've gotten a question on Canada wrong 3 times in a row, like 3 days in a row, watch Canada 3 times in a row. If you keep getting it wrong, keep watching it. Okay, 8 p.m. is that hour of weaknesses. So that list I showed you before, where we talked about doing 20 car RX questions or physio videos, this would be the time to say, okay, I am just awful at cardio. I'm going to spend an hour on cardio every night until it is no longer my worst subject. And then when that's not my worst subject anymore, I'm going to get to my next worst subject. You don't need to keep studying the things you're good at. You need to keep studying the things you're bad at. You have an hour of Anki because, again, we need to get through all of our filter decks for incorrects and marked cards. Very, very important. Sometimes this spills a little over into your Netflix time, but you want to take an hour of Netflix or have a couple Oreos, glass of wine, whatever you need to relax and go to sleep at 11 o'clock because you need to stay on a schedule and you need to get a lot of sleep. Again, Golden for audio to help fall asleep. So people might be like, oh my gosh, I'm not going to have time for Netflix. I'm not going to have time for a lunch break. I'm not going to have time for a gym session. If you don't do those things, you'll never make it 7 weeks. That's going to just be impossible. You will burn out. You will have 4 really good weeks and then you're going to crash. So if you don't want to take a break, you don't want to take a half day, that's fine, but you will burn out. So I highly recommend from the beginning giving yourself those couple hours a day and couple hours a week where you have to take a break. I also made a schedule here for just the list of resources. So this is how many UWorld questions there are. This is how many UWorld days there are. So you need to do around 94 a day, which gives us that 100 question 2.5 blocks. These are the biochem first aid pages, general principles first aid page, farm and path, and physio and anatomy. So just how many total there are and how many you need to do a day. Just for your scheduling and for my scheduling, how many sketchy micro there are. There's 104 videos, so you need to do 3 a day. Picturize, there's 141, you need to do 4 a day. Pathoman, there's 19 chapters, 3 per week. So that's just how I made the schedule, and that just kind of gives you an idea of what you need to do if you need to rearrange. There's also a half-day schedule that I made for the days after the NBMEs. It basically just removes the UWorld questions, has you finishing around 1 p.m., and the rest of the day you should be out of the house, out of your study environment. Don't just lounge around. Don't just take a nap. You want to completely reset your brain and body and go have some fun. But you still want to keep the same bedtime so that you can wake up and do questions the next day. This is the link I mentioned for the percentages on the exam. So as you see, general principles, highly, highly tested. Very important. That's why Picturize helps so much. You see that immuno and lymph blood, 7 to 11%, behavioral sciences, 9 through 13. So you can just get an idea. Social sciences, ethics, very low on the list. So if you are really bad at social sciences, yes, you want to work on it, but you also want to know that it's a small percentage of the exam. And that's pretty much everything. The only thing I have left is the little spreadsheet I made for keeping track of your NBMEs. Okay, so this is made, again, for St. George students who had a BSc 1, a BSc 2, and a CBSc. I put my score in here for March, and I took my step here, just to kind of show you guys that I started out here at 209, and I was able to jump, over several months to this score. And this just shows you how you should be keeping track every day or every week of your NBME scores. UWorld 1 and UWorld 2 and NBME, ideally 18, should all be kept till last. They are the best predictors. Again, not spot on, but the best predictors. So I have UWorld, I'll show you up at the schedule. So the last couple weeks here, you have UWorld 2, the last week, UWorld 1, the 6th week, and those will be your best predictors. If you don't do well on those, most people will push their step. So those are your guiding points. They are the best predictors. So you definitely want to save those to the end, and you really, really want to take those seriously. The last week 6, week 5, week 4, I have you taking 2 NBMEs, and that is, again, just to see all the questions. There's a lot of questions that you'll see word for word on your step that come from NBMEs. A lot of pictures you'll see complete because they're from the same people. So you want to see those as much as possible, but you don't want to freak out if you don't do well in them. They're practice, just like you will. They're practice. They're to make you see more, to make you learn more. Okay, so that is everything I have to talk about. Hopefully that answered a lot of your questions. Everything below will be available for you to download. If you have any questions about any of the resources, I didn't mention, questions about Anki, questions about UWorld, you need tutoring advice or step skills, like question skills, feel free to comment below. I will respond to you and try and get some dialogue going about suggestions. If you have questions because you haven't finished Boards and Beyond, or you haven't even started UWorld, or anything like that, please feel free to ask, and good luck, everybody.